I like the idea of exploring just the everyday view of what is success and um, what is creativity, what is important, and how do you change the world? Because people have these weird ideas.
Welcome to Live Rich, Have Fun, Save the World, a podcast focused on reimagining how we define success. Co-hosted by myself, Monty Bernard, and the CEO of Expensify, David Barrett. So today on Live Rich, Have Fun, Save the World, we have critically acclaimed children's author, activist, and all-around lovely person, Andrea Beaty. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. It's
We are
lovely.
stoked to have you on. I'm a huge fan of your work, and diving right into it. Reading your work, reading Ada Twist, scientist, Rosie Revere, engineer, Iggy Peck, architect, all amazing, inspiring tales for youngsters to really get their minds fired up for STEM, fired up for aspects of society that we really need more great minds in. We want to know what aspects, what elements, what themes enrich your life day to day that inspire you to write these kinds of stories.
Oh gosh. It's funny because people think that I write books about STEM, and I don't think I really do. It's true that Rosie is a book about engineering, ostensibly, but it's really a book about perseverance.
Mhm.
And Eight is a book about curiosity. And even though that maps directly to science, and Iggy is about passion. So I think what happens in my work is that I just kind of go and follow things that interest me. And that's always been my MO, which is sort of how I started off studying biology and then ended up now writing kids' books. I don't even know. Weird, curvy path, as I think many people take. But if you look and see interesting pathways to this side or that side, and you go, I don't know what that is. Looks like a neat road. Let's go that way. Which is also how we vacation, which means that we literally never know where we're going to end up when we're driving on vacation. Like, what? How did we get here? It's an island and we're in a car. This is bad. Or is it good? We don't know. So I think what happens is that I come up with something that I'm thinking about, something that I'm trying to mull over in my head and make sense of. And in doing that, then I kind of map that to the artwork from David's illustrations, where
Mhm.
he created when we wrote Iggy Peck. This kind of goes deep back into history, but I wrote Iggy Peck, and David did the illustrations for that just based on the text of the book. But in the process, he came back with this beautiful classroom of kids, this just stunning, diverse, beautiful classroom of kids. And each of the kids that he drew, he really created them as complete, real characters in his mind. Some of them have backstories, some of them don't, but he kind of knows who they are, but he doesn't tell me any of that. So he keeps that to himself, but there are little clues hidden in those illustrations. And as I'm looking at those kids in the picture and I'm trying to puzzle out, like, who are you and what's your story? I may see a little clue about something they have with them or something they do or a way they're looking at somebody
Yeah.
else. And so at the same time that that's going on, I'm riddling out whatever it is I'm trying to make sense of in my own life and the world and, just being a person. And sometimes those pair up and sometimes they match. And so it really becomes me trying to figure out something about curiosity or passion or whatever. And then also trying to crack myself up with jokes or amuse myself because at the end of the day, it sounds terrible, but I really kind of write my books for me. And it has just been a miracle and wonderful that kids also kind of connect, which tells you I'm about a second grader, at heart. And that's the best place in the world to be. So
Yeah, we all got that in there. We all got that in there.
It's pretty interesting how you're saying that, and I think you can see those in the books. Every character in the book, and even all the back characters who are unexplained, they all are very distinct. And there's a tremendous amount of diversity to all of Blue River Creek and the streets and every picture. And I also like how in some of the illustrations there be hints of the other books as well. Like if you look in the background of an image in Iggy Peck's, you'll see the Sphinx or like something like this from the other books and so forth. And so I think that it's especially interesting to hear that there are mysteries to Blue River Creek that even you don't know, that even only your illustrator does.
Oh, yeah. I mean, David sticks little Easter eggs in there that, I've been reading Iggy for over a decade and I still find hidden things in there. And I'll contact him and say, David, is this whatever the thing? He's so sweet. He's so charming. He always says, "Oh, he's British too." And he says, "Oh, I hope you don't mind." And I'm like, "Yeah, stop being so crazy awesome, David. Just cut it out."
I love the aspect of the shared Andrea Beaty universe of these characters teaming up for hopefully in the future they'll be able to solve problems together, with different facets of their own
Yeah.
respective skills. That would be cool.
Well, that's kind of the thing that's unfolding now as we do chapter books as well. So we
Hmm.
started with picture books, and as these characters sort of reveal themselves to me, and through David's art, and also as just the timing is right where I'm trying to riddle things out. So they're very slow to write because it's sort of like this, the perfect atmosphere has to happen, and um, but as we create the picture books, then now we're also adding chapter books, and that's kind of what's happening is we get a chance to meet more people in Blue River Creek, and what I'm finding is that all the adults are just sort of zany and weird, and have their own idiosyncrasies. I always say that weird word, weirdly, but they're all these funky people who are just like the little kids grown up.
Yeah.
So my favorite
Mm,
is Great Aunt Bernice,
mm.
who is. I have a lot of old people in my books. I like that intergenerational thing, which I
Well,
think so many
now she's
people
got the
don't
cool
have.
house, so she's all set.
She is. She does have the good cool house after the mysterious mansion with Iggy. But the what I love about her, she's all about digging things out of the ground. So she has a shop where it's called the Can You Dig It shop, and anything you can dig out of the ground is going to be in there. So suddenly we've got this wide world of paleontology and history and archaeology, and pretty much anything I want to explore, I'm going to find a way to stick in there.
I
Well,
love
that's
it.
interesting. So, how you say that you're writing the books to explore your own kind of curiosities. When did you start working on Sofia Valdez for Future Press?
So,
Um,
so yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm curious, like, what was going on that made you think about about elections and about teaching kids about elections, and
Yeah.
especially with the mysterious vote and the lost vote and things like this. And so,
So,
what was going into your mind that's like, I want to prepare kids to understand this in the future?
yeah. So Sophia's kind of the one exception where I did write a book more geared towards kids, thinking with having them as the audience in mind, because usually it's just sort of what's amusing me, but also Sophia amused me too. But after that election, we had this odd election back in, what was it, 2,000 years ago, it seems.
I blacked out of my memory. I don't know. It's all a blur.
2016. That was a big deal, as you all well know. But the thing that happened after the election is that I started hearing so many stories from teachers, and I know a lot of educators, and I have a lot of friends with kids, but I started hearing so many stories of kids who were really scared. They were either scared
Hmm.
that their parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles were going to be deported, or maybe they were kids of color, and all of a sudden, these friends that they'd had their whole lives were kind of calling them names, and there was this sudden just real fear from kids and anxiety about what's going on, because kids know when big things are going on. We
Yeah.
try to protect them from it. We try to shield them from it, as we should, as the gatekeepers of their worlds. But they know when seismic shifts are going on, and they need to know that they can be okay, and that also that they can have a role to play, have some agency in figuring out what's going on and making things better in the world. So the topic that came to me really was, I wanted to look at fear, but also bravery. Like, what does it mean to be brave? And I
Hmm.
think
Yeah.
I have been really blessed that I've had great editors. And the editor who began the series, Susan Van Meter, who's now gone from Abrams Books for Young Readers, and they're fabulous, fabulous publishers. But she was also the editor on Sofia Valdez. That was her last book we did together. And so I wrote the first draft of Sophia. And in it, Sophia goes out there. She's just this little tyke, and she goes and rescues a dog from a tree or some, boy, howdy, she does a super brave thing. And Susan so wisely said, "Well, what about other acts of bravery that are quiet? Because every day, like, that's the stuff that life is made of. It's those decisions, the small decisions that are magnificent and enormous. So the small acts of kindness. So she really sent me down the path of thinking, what does it mean to be brave? And so that's kind of the story of Sofia. Comes out of this girl
Hmm.
who has to do something. There's the backstory is there's a big landfill and her abuelo gets hurt one day,
That
and
squirrel.
she's like, yeah, he's like, we should get rid of that and get um, make a park. And so she's like, let's do a park. And everyone's like, yes, great idea. Let us know when it's done, as people are wont to do. Good idea, Sophia. You go get her. Um, so, but she's just a kid. How is she going to do this? But she decides, you know what? She's going to have to try. And that being brave means doing the thing that you must do. Though your heart quakes with fear, though you're just in grade 2, So it's all in rhyme, by the way.
Yeah.
But which gets hard after. I have to
I
tell you the
believe it.
title.
Yeah. It's
The
impressive.
titles are the one that are killing me. But so that idea, like, that was the most recent example of thinking about, well, not the most recent example, because I'll tell you about the next one. But thinking about what is bravery, and I really thought I spent a lot of time thinking about it, because I think it was one of the things of the last few years, and always, I mean, throughout history, every moment of every day you have choices to make, and you can choose to do the kind thing or you can choose to do nothing. But there really is no such thing as doing nothing.
Hmm.
Not doing something is doing something.
Yeah.
So you can choose to speak up when you see something wrong. You can choose to be silent, but if your silence has volume, and people need to know that. But every time you have an act of kindness, I liken it to throwing a rock in a pond, and you make a splash, and where that splash will go out and out and out, and somewhere it will hit the shore, and you don't know what impact that's going to have. You don't know what, as that travels out from you, what the repercussions of your kindness or your lack of kindness or your indifference or your hostility, where that goes and what it does. So those are the kind of things that I think about as I usually am sitting on my porch staring blankly into space.
Well, you hit the nail on the head of living an enriching life by acts of kindness and courage and bravery. And by just that, not only, we like to talk about on this show that living rich isn't just having cool gadgets and
Oh
having a
yeah.
cool house, but it's enriching the lives of others and giving back in other ways. So that, I can't think of a better way to live rich than to throw those stones of empathy and caring and courage and bravery.
Yeah, you know what? And sometimes those can be big things. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm incredibly blessed and, very lucky that my books have found an audience. I've certainly books that have 5 people who think we're the best books ever written, and that will be it. So I have this lovely platform, but at the end of the day, I don't know if that's the thing that will go on and make the biggest difference, or if it's just being kind to somebody. Like, oh my gosh, the other day I was at, I don't know, Costco, I guess, or someplace. And they have those, they have the little deli thing where you can get the really obnoxiously large piece of pizza, which
Oh
I'm not
yeah.
opposed to having. And just standing in line, I talked to the woman. I said, how's your day going? Guys, I thought she was going to cry. It was like no one had ever asked her that. And she stopped and went, well, it's I'm having a good day. Thank you. And I thought, oh my gosh, people be nicer to this lady,
Yeah.
first of all.
Elements of
Don't
human
just
connection, right? That are just
Yeah.
overlooked in this day and age.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe she'll go out and then pass that on, or somehow that will make a difference. We don't know.
It
We
makes
don't
that
know.
ripple. It makes
So
that ripple.
you hinted very briefly there that you have a new idea for a new book, and I'd be curious for, like, before talking about that, like, what is the genesis of that? Like, what was going on in your life that caused you to think, like, aha, this is a good one?
So the next book is coming out in November, and it's called Aaron Slater Illustrator. And actually, this is a book that has been kind of brewing for a very long time. And it's born from the character that David drew. He's a little African American kid with the white t shirt and the jeans and bright yellow socks. And it's just this little tiny, tiny detail that David stuck into this book, um, into all these illustrations. Like this kid who's just kind of just hanging out, but he always has flowers with him. He's always got
Hmm.
like in Ada Twist, when they're looking at in the jars and they're doing an experiment, every kid has something that they're trying to tell us smells of. His
Yeah.
has a flower. And in Sofia Valdez, when they're marching around with their picket signs, his just has a flower. It doesn't have any words. And so I got a chance to spend a lot of time with David in England a couple years ago and learned a lot about him. He's a lovely guy, but I learned really more about his childhood. And David's dyslexic. So he struggled mightily in school as a kid, mightily. And so for him, though, art was the way that he could let himself be free, and he could find ways to really excel through art and make his, tell stories and all kinds of things. And I thought I wanted to take a look at the beauty, the power of beauty, the power of art, um, and also innately in that, I think, is hope. So, because when you look at something beautiful, we recognize that, and I think that's hope that comes out of that. If there can be this beauty in the world, then things can always get better.
Hmm.
And so this ends up being a story of a little boy who is dyslexic, and he wants to know how to read even from a tiny tot. He's raised in this wonderful family where they're all sort of musicians, and they have a lot of flowers, and sort of an artsy fartsy family, I think, but just lovely family. And he really wants to learn to read, but he just struggles and he just can't get it. And he thinks, okay, well, when I get to school, then I'll figure it out. And he gets to
Mm.
school there in kindergarten, and boy, he shows up with his fancy red jacket with flowers all over it, ready to go, and his bright yellow socks. And it just doesn't work for him. And it doesn't work. And it doesn't work. And we see as he gets older and tries that he just starts sort of fading away. And David, just through his illustrations, and I've only seen the first sketches of it, but you just physically see through subtle things like his jacket, the flowers kind of start disappearing
Mm.
from his jacket, so that
Mm.
by the time Aaron gets through first grade and by the time he makes it to second grade, he is kind of now like he's sort of given up. He's like, well, I'm not going to stand out, so I'm just going to blend in.
Mm.
I'm just going to be one of the kids, and I'm just going to try to hunker down and keep my head low and just get through. Um, but then he gets in Miss Greer's class, and you can only kind of fake it through so far. And when she asked them to do some writing, then you know the crisis point arises. But his art brings him through, and
Mm.
sort of reveals it's not shocking that would be the case since he is an illustrator, and put it right there in the title.
Yeah. Big spoiler there. Big spoiler.
So bad at keeping secrets.
I just love that thoroughfare through all of your work is the overcoming of adversity and using those themes and those skills that you incorporate into it. And like a big concept of this show is the concept of fun, but as David has
Yeah.
mentioned before, hard fun. The fun of learning new skills and overcoming adversity and having that fulfillment. Like you mentioned, Ada is about curiosity, Rosie is about perseverance in there. Finding those fun skills day to day writing these books, obviously there's got to be a challenge to it. Obviously it doesn't just maybe you do just write it all out in one day and it's all
Oh,
there, and
shaboom, there we go.
and the universe is your muse. But who knows. But I
Yeah,
am curious,
that's
we
a
are
good story, and I'm sticking to that.
what's your favorite part about the process, though, about the day in the life of your job? What's your favorite part
Oh,
about these challenges and all?
that's really hard. And you guys probably experience the same thing. For me, boy, really goes book by book, but I love that moment when you get a new idea and it's just rattling around in your head and it becomes sort of this obsession, like, and you're thinking about it all the time. And it's a bit like falling in love, you're just sort of carry that with you
Mm.
everywhere you go. And no matter what you should be doing, you're sitting there still thinking about it. I mean, right? It's like when you get an idea, David, for your, a new aspect to your business or a new adventure, don't you just kind of go, ah?
Oh yeah, it's the best. I know. I kind of like Rosie's approach towards it. It's like, oh yeah, the design part's my favorite, and then the construction is also my favorite, and the testing is the best.
That's
And I
my
and I
favorite.
agree, every part of it is great, but the greatest of the great is at the start, when it's just an idea and you're just trying to like grapple with it. And I find that most of my time, like the most important programming I do is on paper. I sit in a coffee shop or drinking a cup of tea with a pen and a blank piece of paper, and that's where the best work happens. And everything else just flows from there. And when you're in that zone, man, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Monty, do you have things too? Is that kind of your...
Yeah, I mean, I'm a musician and writing music, writing songs.
Oh, for
When
sure.
you'll be, there's songs that you'll be working at tirelessly for a week, and you'll be like, "Is this any good?" After I've stared at it for a week long, and then there are riffs that somebody will play something, and everyone will just go, "That, do
Yeah.
that again, do that again," and then you'll just, and then 20 minutes later, you have a full song done. It's that's the best.
Yeah, and I guess I'm always curious, and I don't know. I mean, I guess at the end of the race, you get to look back and say, is there a difference between those two things? Like, are the books that came easily, or the songs that came easily, the projects, are those the ones that are better, or are they not better, or are they just different than the
Yeah.
ones that you had to literally, like, scrape, scrape, scrape to get through them? I never know. But that is the joy of being creative. It is so much fun. It's never lonely either. I mean, in one sense, you spend an enormous amount of time alone, but your head's crowded with people. I've got whole towns in there. So.
Well, and plus, I think your job's got to be pretty cool. So, we'll talk about the space station. How did your book get? What was that all about?
Yeah,
that groovy. Yeah. So there's this wonderful festival. I think it's still going in DC every year, or every other year, maybe every 2 years. And it's the U.S. Science and Engineering Festival. When Rosie was coming out, I went to DC and I took literally 50,000 stickers or something for Rosie. The book wasn't known, it had brand spanking new. And I just went around to pretty much every booth and said, hey, doing the I'm an author. Would you
Jazz
like
hands.
to learn about my book? Yeah, sparkle fingers, the whole 9 yards. And just, trod through the place for the weekend. And it was great fun. I mean, just the coolest of everything STEM, everything tech, everything sciencey. And I was walking along and I had a couple copies of the book with me. And there was a man, and I'm not going to blank my brain. I'm not going to remember his name now. There was an astronaut there who was, because NASA had a big presence.
Mm-hmm.
And oh shoot, I'm really going to be angry at myself for not remembering his name. But I gave him a copy of the book just because I think, my gosh, if you dedicate your life to going out into space, given like the incredible dedication that has, I can't even imagine. And you do that, and the benefits that brings back to all of us people here, most of us never even knowing the sacrifices you make. I think that's brilliant, and it's always I'm a big believer in saying thank you when people do things like that. I don't always follow through, but in my mind, I've written a million thank you notes, so I'm gonna have to work on that. But anyway, I gave him a copy of Rosie, and then went on my way, and he went on his way. And about 6 months later, I got an email that said, we're starting a program called Story Time from Space. Would you mind if we send Rosie Revere? Yeah, would you mind if we send Rosie Revere to the International Space Station to be read by an astronaut? And I'm like, oh, I'm busy that day, I'm sure. Why is there a question mark here? I don't understand that. Yeah, please. Oh, and thank you. And so they did. And it's this wonderful program. It's a nonprofit program. They work with the International Space Station and the Center for Advancement of Science and Space. And the idea is just to sort of connect reading and STEM and space exploration. And so they send books up into the space station. Astronauts read them and they download the videos. And so Story Time from Space is the website. It's absolutely fabulous. And then Ada got to go up as well, and a different astronaut read that.
That's awesome.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I know.
This becomes a thing. You've got to have them all. I mean, like, it'd be silly not to.
It will be a subscription service, a subscription to space for your books. You'll just they'll just swap them out like Netflix. They're okay, cool.
You have to renew it about how many hours does it take? 13, I forget what it is. They're very fast.
Talk about a grassroots success, though. Literally going to it and stickering and, very
Oh,
punk rock of you going out there, and now it's in space. Oh
Yeah,
my
that's
goodness.
amazing.
I thought my
Does it
feet
get any
would
better?
fall off. My feet have never hurt so much in my whole life, but
Well,
it was
what I
great.
love about that is it really talks about just how much hustle it takes to be a writer. Like, yes, you have to write,
Yeah.
definitely, but
Yeah.
it's not just about that. It's like you have to, like anything in life, if it's interesting, the fun part is the hard work, and then the other, like, 90% of the effort is just all this grinding
It's
promotion
true.
and just the hustle to make
Yeah.
it happen. And so I think that's a good reminder that uh, having an amazing book, having an amazing story is just the start. That's like the table stakes.
Yeah.
Everything else is actually just the
Yeah.
hard work after it.
That's right, that's right, and it's one of those things. I mean, early on, I remember talking with my editor, and we were working on my first novel, and, she's like, "Boy, you're really easy to work with," and I'm like, "Well, I kind of think thank you, but I kind of think also that the world is full of talented people. The world is full of great books and great manuscripts and deserving books. So at the end of the day, as an editor, you have maybe three books in front of you, and or two books in front of you, and there's the author who's a real pain in the patoot. And then there's the one who's like kind of pleasant, but the books are equally good. I know which one I'd spend my time with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a good strategy right there. So I'd
Yeah,
be
and
curious,
yeah.
going along with that, tell me about Netflix and this show coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is so much fun, guys. I'll tell you. So yes, in the fall, I think September. I've not seen a release date yet, but I think somewhere in September, there will be Ada Twist Scientist as a Netflix show, and that happened when a producer named Mark Burton from Worldwide or Wonder Worldwide came to us and said, would I'd like to do a show, and this is my idea on it. And we had a lot of people who were interested in doing, but he had just had the vision that I think fit the that really fit the world, and he seemed to understand innately this sort of the view of the world from Blue River Creek. And so we decided to go with him, and then they synced up with Netflix, and then the Higher Ground production from the Obamas have joined in, and
It's
so it's
amazing.
like kind of groovy, not gonna
Quite the
lie.
team. Quite the team.
Super
How
enjoying it. Quite a team, yeah.
Yeah, that's a powerhouse. And so I imagine there must be some anxiety for, like, how do you maintain a degree of creative control while still enabling others to get the best out of that? How do you kind of manage that tension?
You know, that's not been a big deal. I mean, I think everyone there, working on this project, from the writers and the producers and the showrunners and everyone is really in love with this world and these kids, and they want to make it right. They want to do it the right way. And so they'll bring, their own ideas on how to go about it, but they've all really been accurate. They've been really good interpretations of the world. And then,
Hmm,
there's some few tweaky changes and family
sure.
structure and things that which I get that, they need to work for their audiences and things. And the audience is younger. It's sort of a preschool show, so that's a bit different than say their chapter books.
Hmm.
But everyone has just come to it with this desire to do really good work. And I think it's been less difficult because it's not unlike the process of writing a picture book, where I write the words, and in my mind I have this fantastic view of exactly how it's going to be. And then it goes out into the world, and they find an illustrator who makes something that is nothing like that. And always my instant reaction is, no, that's wrong. And that lasts about 3 seconds, and then I go, oh, you know what? That's exactly right, and it's perfect, and then it goes on from there. And I mean, I finally now with David and we've worked together a long time, and I never imagine exactly what he's going to do, but I just know he's gonna do something amazing,
Hmm.
so there's no stress with that. But I decided a long time ago, I mean, early on, I can write books all day, and I can keep them in my desk drawer and enjoy them and take them out and pet them, and I do. I have a lot of them in there. I feed them regularly. I love them and I adore them. But that doesn't mean they're ever going to actually go out and be published and see the light of day. So if you want to be a published author, you send it out. And it's a bit like sending your kid off to college. And, You don't know if they're coming back with tongue studs, Oxfords, or both, or what's going to happen. And it's all great if they do. They come back and they're different. But if you've entrusted people who are talented, and then you trust those talented people, they always just make the books better. And I've just really always had have a great publisher, and everybody there. I'll go visit them in New York, and everybody knows the books and loves and cares about them, no matter how tangentially they may touch those stories. They care, and that's kind of all you can hope for. Trust talented people, and they'll surprise you and bring in ideas that you never thought of. And so it's kind of how things grow. And I'm sure maybe that's your experience as well with
I was just
creating
going to
things.
say that's a very interesting parallel between kind of how we hire at Expensify, the kind of people we hire, and our criteria for hiring, humble, driven, ambitious people. David can speak to this a lot more than I can, but it's definitely a fantastic workforce to work with other people that are creative and trusting other people to come up with these ideas. We hire people who are all across the diverse spectrum of different ideas and backgrounds. Heck, I used to tour playing heavy metal, and now I talk about expense reports and living rich, having fun, and saving the
That
world.
makes sense.
Again,
Yeah,
talking about that parallel little detour we take in the buffet of life, and here we are.
Yeah,
So trusting creative people, I mean, that just says it all right there.
yeah. I really
yeah.
love how you put that, and I think that you're right. This idea of you can have total perfect control of your ideas, and they stay in your shelf, and no one ever
Yeah,
sees them, and they never see the light of day. And so I think there is about a degree of recognizing that the idea is its own thing, and you can influence it, you can launch it, but you have to create an environment for it to
yeah.
survive and flourish. And that environment consists of a whole bunch of other people who aren't you that will bring their own influences. And what ends up is so much
Oh,
better.
yeah.
I think of Expensify kind of like a garden where it's like this very like rich and verdant garden, and everyone is always planting and curating, and sometimes we trim, sometimes we plant, and every day something new blooms, and it's like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't even know we planted that flower. That's an amazing flower.
Yeah,
And so every day is always miraculous because there's so much
yeah.
going on and no one is in control. It's basically this beautiful chaos. And I think so long that as everyone there has the right intentions, and as I think as Monty mentioned, we hire for talent, ambition, and humility. And if you get those three things, the combination of those two makes a person, which is just an incredibly powerful and fantastic person to be with. And if you get enough of those people together, you create an amazing group. And so I think this idea of letting
Yeah.
ideas flourish on their own in the right environment, surrounded and supported by the right people, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's fascinating to mention humility in that, because that would seem to me like the absolutely most important bit, because otherwise you end up with a lot of people who are very talented, but also so many egos that can't play
Absolutely.
together very well. And then, okay, so we're all going to, battle each other
Yeah.
instead of coming together and being generous and thinking of what else we can do. And
I kind of think of it
yeah,
like, you've played like Angry Birds or one of these games where you're shooting
sure.
stuff over. And I think there's like the three components of that. Or it's like, first there's talent, and that's kind of the angle of what you're going to launch. And then there's ambition, which is how hard you pull back, basically. But the most
Uh-huh.
important thing that determines how far you go is humility, which is kind of like gravity. And basically, the more humble you are, the less gravity there is. There's less just pushing, just pulling everything down. And if you have a
Yeah.
group that basically is just committed to everyone's going to pull back really hard and aim really high, and we're all going to support each other so things will just come crashing to the
Yeah.
ground, you can get great places.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. I
I
like,
love
like that. That's the Angry Bird model. I'm going to remember
Yeah,
that.
the Angry Bird
Exactly
model of
right.
management,
Da-
No, it's true. I use a phrase sometimes where I just, like, whenever we're trying to figure things out, how does this work? How does a deal work out or whatever? My guiding principle is I try to say everyone has to come out whole,
Hmm.
because if everyone's putting their hearts into it and their time and their effort and their vision and their life resources, which none of which are limitless, they needs to be in something in it for them as well. And it only just comes back in heaps and bounds for the whole project and for everything when that happens. So I think that's the great fun of making the books together, because it is a collaborative thing. I don't illustrate my own books, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's good to know your own limits.
I have my own
There
limits.
you go. There's that
Although I do
humility.
think
Yeah.
everyone, yeah, I do think everyone has an artistic talent. They just haven't maybe found the right medium yet. So
That's
for me, it's
interesting.
words, and it's not so much drawing, although I do like drawing. But I don't have
I
that
love that.
skills. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's you
mine is
find your lane.
expense reports. The most artistic of all mediums.
No, but I will tell you what, that does change the world because the amount of time you can save people. Holy cow!
She gets it, David. She gets it.
Yeah,
I
we have a believer.
I
Perfect.
do Oh man, I do not miss the days of having to do that sort of thing. And I remember like, oh, so no, you got it.
Yeah.
Your Angry Bird thing is working out for the
Good,
for
good.
the people
Yeah.
who have to deal with expense reports.
I've definitely been on calls, getting companies onboarded with us, and where accountants are on the verge of tears. They're so happy they don't have to
Oh,
work in Excel sheets, so that makes it all worth it at the end of the day.
I know. I use Excel just often enough to vaguely remember it, and enough to get in there and go, I don't remember it at all. And then, oh, ugly, ugliness.
I love that. Speaking to just the universal appeal of your books, I mean, like you said, the ultimate punk rock grassroots movement of going to DC and spreading the message, and you have a show with the production company of the Obamas. You have your
Yeah.
books being read in
space.
In
In
space.
space. No one can hear you turn pages. Yes, they can. They can hear you. They have microphones up
So
there.
I'm curious. I'm curious why you think the subject matter of all of your books resonates so well with kids. Obviously, the themes we talked about earlier are, of course, universal, and I love that you bring that into STEM fields and different fields of creativity and different fields of learning. Traditionally, it's not really been a riveting demographic for under 10-year-olds to get into engineering or get into science. And I think you've guised it with those themes that are universal to kids. Do you think that's why it's caught on so much? I'm curious your opinion on why your success is so universal.
No, absolutely. And it's because at a very fundamental level, like thinking about Ada Twist,
Mm-hmm.
every kid is curious. I mean, every kid is curious. So when they see Ada, who is just obsessed with questions, she's consumed with finding out why, how, what, when, where. They are like that. I mean, any 4-year-old in the course of a day, they'll ask you 1,000 questions. It's the greatest thing ever. Uh, so kids can look at her and say, I'm curious. She's a scientist. Maybe I'm a scientist.
Mm.
With Rosie, every kid has had frustrations. They have tried to make something, it has not worked, and they don't know how to handle that.
Mm.
So they go, oh, I'm frustrated and I don't know what to do. That Rosie was like that too. Maybe I'm an engineer. Um, and every kid has passions for something, whatever it is. They will go out and they are so consumed with creating something or something that just catches their, and it changes maybe every day or 2 days or weeks or
Yeah.
5 minutes. But it's 100% when they're in there. They're like thinking about I'm going to build things. So every kid has passion. So to them, they see Iggy as themselves. And I think it's fascinating. And this is a very small distinction, but something that I'm extremely proud of and something that I think tells me that that works is that, and I didn't set out to do that, by the way. I didn't set out to say I'm going to write a book about engineering. It just sort of happened to be like Rosie could have been doing something else,
Mm-hmm.
but actually, I did make her an engineer because I wanted to see what David would do with the art after he did Iggy. I thought he's going to slay this, and he
Yeah.
did. Um, but the fascinating thing is that when kids read these books and they come back out and they don't say, I'm going to be a scientist, I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to be an architect. They say, I am a scientist,
Hmm.
I am an engineer, I am an
That's
Wow.
architect.
interesting. It's not this future like, what are you going to be when you grow up?
No,
It's basically like, look at Rosie. She's an engineer right now.
So
yeah.
am I. I
I'm an
love that.
engineer now. I'm curious. I'm a scientist. And that is
Yeah.
actually true. One of the things I try to convey to parents, like, we somehow manage to have so many adults that are so scared of science, so scared of math, so scared of engineering, and things that they may not have technically and purposefully studied, or maybe that were so far in their rearview mirror now that they've kind of forgotten about them. But is the idea that everybody is a scientist. And so for especially parents of little kids, if you have a kid, when your kid comes to you, as they will do, and say, why is the blue sky blue? And the parent does not remember that day in seventh grade science. And they go, and boy, it's like, yeah, oh, here, honey, someone's at the door. I got to Flintstone it out of here. And I mix my metaphors there. But the idea that they get so freaked out about it when the answer is so easy, it's just, I don't know, let's find out. Why is this? I don't know, let's find out. And then you have kids who become the leaders. They are taking their adults into the world of exploration and looking for answers, or maybe just more questions, which is even more exciting. And that's what science is. So I hope that through these books then that parents can kind of loosen up a little bit. And that's actually one of the things that has been fun about the project books we do, where I look at the topics, so science, or the most recent one, which is Sofia's book of, what is it? Oh, the Big Project Book for Awesome Activists is the new one. It comes out this week. This week.
Wow.
I should say that with less of a question mark. It comes out this week.
Next week. Yeah. The May 4th. May 4th.
But the idea there is kind of the same. It's like that. What things do kids already? How do they think about things? And in the project book for activists, it's about just civics. How does a city run? How does my town run? How does my family run? Like who makes the rules? How does that happen? What, how thinking about things in terms that the kids, their lives and how they live, and then mapping that to bigger topics. And for like science is about curiosity. It's about getting frustrated. It's about sticking to things. It's about, I don't know, just learning stuff. So tackling big topics, but in terms of very personal traits that kids have. Kids, scientists are creative. So create a picture, make a picture out of these things. Well, kids can do that. And they're like, oh, well, maybe I am a scientist. And it's just the different aspects of whatever the job is, whatever the field is, rather, and sort of mapping it to that. It's kind of just flipping backwards from what people usually do. They say, you're a scientist, therefore, well, do sciencey things, whatever.
Well, that ties perfectly. The Sofia Valdez Big Project Book for Awesome Activists is such a novel and fantastic book idea that you're coming out with. And it really ties into the third theme of the show, Save the World. And saving the world sounds like this lofty, giant goal, just like becoming a scientist sounds like this lofty, giant goal. But it's just those kernels of individual acts of whether it be bravery, courage, kindness, empathy, and in this case, activism and understanding how your world works and teaching those children in the next generation on how they can get that start early on, but before they take civics in high school, or if they even still teach civics in high school. Boy, I feel old saying that just now, but who knows? But and that's what we love about your work so much.
Thank you. Yeah, but that's the thing. Why is that left to high school? Every kid, and there is social studies, I assume still, I mean, but I think we have somehow as a society, and, I don't know how global this is, but I think it probably varies from where you are, but I think we have sort of gotten into this era where we expect other people to do the things. We expect other people to take care of running our town. And we may vote for it, but we need to know how things work. We need to know how our city is structured and how our towns and our states and what pays for things. Like, so in this book, I look at things starting sort of, the idea is sort of starting with a person, and then what is your community? Your community starts with your family. Then it's your neighbors, and then it's your school, then it's your town, maybe it's your neighborhood, then your town, your city, your state, your country, your planet. And as a person, just like in that pond, you're at the center of this, but what you do goes out and affects, wider and wider. And you have agency to make change, even if you are a kid. Kids, I want them to know that they have power. And that was, I kind of long way back to why I wrote Sofia at all. But it was back in that time when so many kids were being scared that I wanted them to know that they had agency, they had power, that there are things in their worlds they can control, and that there are always people to help them. There are helpers out there. And I think that's a big thing.
One thing I find kind of interesting, so I have a 6-year-old daughter, and it's been interesting looking at how popular media has changed from when I was a kid. And there's this book I really love. I rave about all the time called, I'm going to get the name wrong. I think it's Everything Bad is Good for You. And it's basically talking about how there's this, it starts off with a series of quotes from like Aristotle, Descartes, and like major like thinkers throughout time. And basically every one of these quotes is the world's going to hell and kids are to blame. And so like the one thing that everyone can agree on throughout all of time is that basically the world, things are getting worse. But in fact, like according to the broad strokes of time, it's like actually by every measure, humanity is getting better now. Climate is a little bit different. It's not humanity. So there's like, we can interpret this data like all other data to tell the story we want. But basically it's like on the broad strokes of things, like humanity is like getting its act together. And I think that, and one reason the sort of the thesis of the book is that popular media, even though it's continuously demonized, and it talks in the book, it's like how when books first came out, it was like, oh, no one's going to remember anything. And then like the printing press came out, it's like, oh, now like, now everyone gets books. Everyone knows only smart people get books. Now everyone's got them. Yeah. Then the radio comes out. It's like, oh, no one's going to read anymore. Then TV comes out. No one's going to listen to the radio anymore. And internet. No one's going to, whatever it is. And so everyone.
And now we're back to podcast.
And now we're back to podcast. Like exactly. And so I think that it's interesting how popular media is always to blame. But at the same time, it gets so sophisticated. And like when I'm watching cartoons with Hazel or whatever it is, I'm amazed how basically every cartoon is awesome anymore. Like I was watching like Barbie Dreamhouse or something like this, which seems like the most vapid possible cartoon. And it's amazing. I like how their presentation of Barbie is incredible. Yeah, like Barbie's presented as like a savant. And I love the episode of her birthday. And all of her friends are like, how old is Barbie? I said, well, I don't know. Well, she was president, and you have to be 40 for that. Then she was an astronaut. That takes about 23 years of training. Yeah. She's also a surgeon. And like basically she spends the entire time, like every episode comes down to like Barbie being some genius and saving the day. And I'm like, how did they spin Barbie to be this very positive message? It's wild. And like I could go on about My Little Pony. I could go on about Spirit. I could go on a million different cartoons. And everything is very... is telling very positive messages about diversity and inclusion and about courage and bravery and fortitude and all of this. And so I think when I read your books, I see so much of that. It's like, yes, they're fantastic stories. They rhyme. There's so much about it that is so fun for me to read and for Hazel to read. But also it's like we don't have to. And it kind of goes back to this idea. I think there's like living rich, having fun, saving the world. These are not contradictory ideas. It's not like a zero-sum game where you have to choose one or the other. I think the best and most successful things are when you're doing all three together. And I think your books really represent that. It's like, these are books about people who are living rich and diverse and interesting lifestyles. They're having fun, exciting adventures, but the consequence of it all is like they're making the world a better place. And that's the story that I think so many people need to hear.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I think that the Barbie show is quite a sleeper though, because I had low expectations. I brought my own bias into that. I'm not gonna lie, I did. But that was a surpriser. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Kids are amazing and deserve honesty, I think, at the end of the day. And that's the thing. To me, what makes a good TV show, a good book or whatever, is that there has to be truth in it. And so those great shows are the ones or books is where you have truth. And I think that is where my books have worked with the things I was discussing about how do you, looking at curiosity, there's truth in that. Because if you look at it and think, and you really examine it honestly, that's what connects to kids. Kids are like the best BS detectors in the world. Nothing gets past them, right? They deserve honesty and they just demand it, and they smell it a million miles away if you're coming at them with something that's not real and true. And I think kids can take and understand a lot more than we give them credit for. So that, sometimes you have to write something and it may not be all pretty and happy, but it's real and they respect that so that they understand things. Kids are the best.
Kids are the best. And speaking that truth to power and speaking to that wellspring of curiosity that all kids are, your books not only go there, but they go the step beyond and really teaching kids the concept of how failure can teach you to move forward and you can learn from it. Whereas
Yeah.
Curiosity obviously is an infinite resource when it comes to children, but failure, if perceived the wrong way, can stunt that curiosity. And we find that, I mean, that's probably been the case for millions of people
Oh, yeah.
who maybe would have gone into that direction of STEM or in any of these different fields, but that failure they didn't have that push, that understanding that, no, this is a good thing and you can learn from that. That empowers them. I love that about your books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I think we do. We all have a very, and each person's different, obviously, but we do have this sense of expectations and what being good at something is. Well, that back to the thing of going to NASA, and I got to go see the launch when they took Rosie up to
So
space.
cool.
Wow.
So cool.
But this was the cool thing, though. So I went the first day, and they were going to launch it, and they get down to the timing, 10, 9, 8. Oh, and they called it off because of these massive like thunder boomers up, and there was something that was too much danger for lightning. So like rats. Scientists and people, they're just like, oh, yeah, okay, we'll come back tomorrow. I'm like, what? This is tragic, So go back the next day. And
No, it's just weather.
They get down to the next day, and they get down to the countdown, and they call it off for wind. And then the third day, I think it got called off for wind. So I finally had to fly back to Chicago. Hadn't seen the thing go up.
Oh,
I'm like,
no.
rats, this is
Call
just
me when the
sad.
rocket goes up.
Call me when it happens. Well, this is the most beautiful thing, though. I'm on the airplane heading back to Chicago, and I'm watching like on my clock the time, and I have no Southwest Wi-Fi. Come on, Southwest, get your
Yeah.
Wi-Fi together. I was trying to watch the countdown. It was like 10. 2 hours later, 9. I'm like, you're not doing it right. But I looked out the window at the time, and I could see the vapor trail going up into space.
Amazing.
And I was like, you know
So cool.
what? That failure after day after day after day. And for me, it was like there was so much excitement and tension, and I hadn't even spent my life's work making the thing that was doing this, sending these incredibly intricate rockets and things. But all these people had, and they were just like, yeah, okay, well, that just didn't happen. That was a failure. No, it was just the thing that happened next.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
boy, that was a learning experience.
success.
And I thought
is
that was
just,
the most.
Yeah, success is just built on the platform of endless failure. And
Yeah,
it's like, I think that that rocket
it
launch
is.
was the culmination of a tremendous number of failures to get there. And I think that
It
Rosie would
was.
be very proud to be in that rocket.
And I think that was just sort of the most rosy way to witness this event, was sort of like, yeah, it didn't go like we thought, but it happened, and it was just amazing. But that was, and I think just transforming the idea of a failure is just the next thing.
Yeah.
That it's not a big deal.
Mhm.
And that to me, when I do get letters from parents who, will read Rosie to kids, little tiny kids who've had a lot of issues with just, failing and just losing it, just melting down. Because kids, they want to please. And so they have this sense of, sometimes that's internally driven, sometimes it's external, but they want to be, help and make it do right and make it perfect. And then it doesn't. They don't know how to plan that. And then they'll read Rosie and they're like, oh yeah, well, it failed.
Expensify.
We'll do it again. What would
Yeah.
Rosie do?
It's like,
It's okay. And I
congratulations.
think,
That was a fantastic
oh,
failure.
Yeah.
it was, yeah, it was fabulous.
And David can
Fabulous
speak
book.
to that too. I mean, David, you started coding at a really young age and started this direction. And obviously, Expensify wasn't your first job. You didn't start this company when you were 18.
Yeah.
There's been a long story behind that.
How did you
Yeah, I
get
think,
into
like-
coding? What did you do?
So I started programming when I was 6, and then
Oh, wow.
my dad traded a trailer hitch for a VIC-20, and I liked computer games, and so I started doing that. They would take me to the mall, and they would go shopping and just like dump me into a Radio Shack, which had the Tandy computers, and so I'd stay there for like an hour or whatever, and then they would come
miss
back.
Radio
with-
Shack.
Yeah, I know. They'd come back and I would have like this program with like a little bat flying around the screen. And I'm like, look what I did. They're like, cool. You just killed an hour's time while I went shopping. It was awesome. And so, but when I was doing it, like computers weren't the cool thing. It was like, what is this weird novelty? Like no one
Right.
realized that computers were going to take over the world at the time. They were just this thing that some weird people did. And like, I didn't know anyone who programmed, didn't have friends who programmed. And so it was until high school, actually, I didn't actually know really any, like, am I any good? Like, I have no idea until I went to a computer class. And that's when I learned an amazing lesson at college. It's that you don't have to go to the classes in college. You can skip the classes and not get in trouble. And it was amazing. So I just took the tests and I'm like, oh, actually, I know a thing or two about this. But so I think as a kid, there's such a beauty in the ignorance of what's possible and what's not. And I think that
Yeah.
for me, it was just like computers they weren't seen as like a amazing thing, an important skill. They also weren't scary. There was just like, oh, it was just this fun toy. And I feel like the idea,
Yeah.
that's why I love the spirit of the books that you have. It's like, sure, she's an engineer, but she's building a machine to keep snakes away, or a helicopter powered by cheese, or whatever it is. And so as a result,
Yeah.
it's so uplifting and so fun. It brings the fun out of creation for its own sake. And that's what I love.
Thank you. Yeah, it's true. And can we talk about cheese spray? Because I just think there's more power there than people are really recognizing
It's an untapped
as a fuel
potential.
source.
Yeah.
Elon Musk.
Give
It's
him a
not cheese
call.
spray, dude. Give up on the sun. Cheese spray.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us here today
you.
on the show. The new book, Sofia Valdez, Big Project Book for Awesome Activists, is out now. Also, look on your local Netflix station or wherever you watch Netflix for Ada Twist Scientist, hopefully coming in the fall. I just went with the old school approach there. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to reading more of your work in the near future.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you both. And thanks for this podcast. I mean, what a great idea. Just to look at, I like the idea of exploring just the everyday view of what is success and what is creativity, what is important, and how do you change the world? Because people have these weird ideas, but
A lot of weird
They make
ideas
the
out
world
there.
go round. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
Live Rich, Have Fun, Save the World is brought to you by Expensify. Hosted by David Barrett and Monty Bernard. Engineered and produced by Monty Bernard. Theme song by DJ Mick. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Live Rich, Have Fun, Save the World on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you happen to be listening.